and the Integrated Plant Sciences School, and the Dyson School for Applied Economics and Management. So we're pleased to have everyone here. And I am very pleased to be able to introduce our speaker today, Kathleen Hefferon. And thank you. So Kathleen completed her PhD at the University of Toronto, Faculty of Medicine, and she worked as a postdoc in the Department of Food Science at Cornell, and she now teaches in the Department of Microbiology at Cornell. She's the founder and chief technical officer of Forte Protein, a biotech company that can generate any protein using plant as well as other production platforms. Kathleen was the Fulbright Canada Chair of Global Food Security in 2018 and is the author of several books. So she's clearly very interested in our global food systems and how we can improve the outcomes of global food systems for people and for environment. Kathleen, thank you for being here.
There we go. And turn this on. Okay, can everyone hear me? Hope so. All right. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. I used to come to a lot of these lecture series. I'm now teaching a lot, and it always seems to be around this time. So you don't see me quite as often, but I do come from time to time. It's really great to give a talk here. Thank you. Let's see if this is... It should just click. Maybe I'll just use this. Are we stuck? There we go. Okay, now we got it working. Okay. So yes, I founded a company that is right now at the Center for Life Science Ventures over in the Weil building, just across the street from Tower Road. It's on the 4th floor, and there's a lot of startups there, so there's a lot of activity. The company is called Forte Protein, and yes, we make animal proteins and plants, among other things. And I'm unfortunately not going to be able to tell you a lot of specifics about the company because we're in a stealth mode. And this is just the way it is right now, is we're not supposed to reveal all our secrets, and I'd love to. It's kind of the opposite of an academic environment, but I will talk a lot about food security, alternative proteins, et cetera. So I think you'll still be satisfied with what I have to say. If you go to our website, this is what you'll see. It'll be lovely music, and you'll see a little video of dolphins jumping around, and it gives you the sense that, yes, we are very concerned about the natural world, and that is absolutely true. It's one of the reasons why I started this company. And then my other job, my day job, is also to teach a lot. I teach microbiology. I tend to end up with these very large classes of several hundred people, and this is just, what I'm doing most of the time. So going on, today's presentation, today I'm going to talk about, I think this will be just, things you've heard before, but the state of the world, the need for non-animal source protein. So I think I can give you a pretty good argument. So I think a lot of the data you've probably seen or heard before in some form or another. Then I'll talk a bit about molecular farming in general, give you an idea of its potential. And then I thought, because there's a lot of students here, you might like to hear about my entrepreneurial journey, which started here at Cornell, how I ended up starting a company, why you should start a company as well, possibly. So here we go. So first, food insecurity. So certainly I think we all know, some may argue about this exact number, but I think it's a little under 1 billion. People suffer from undernutrition. They're just not getting enough nutrients. They're not getting enough calories. I think that it's basically true that 1/3 of the global population is food insecure. I don't think that has changed much. You might argue it might be a bit higher these days after wars and COVID and what have you. It's just been a little more difficult for people. It also seems to me that there's a huge number of people who suffer from hidden hunger or malnutrition. So they're not having access, day-to-day access to micronutrients that they need, such as vitamins and minerals. And that's just, a plain stark fact about the world today. Hopefully I won't have too many people arguing with me about that. At the same time, though, this is the value of the global food system in general, $14 trillion, which is a shriekingly high number. But at the same time, there are these hidden costs of our food system that are going on all the time that amplify this greatly. And this is a number that was in 2020 estimated $12.7 trillion. So there's a lot of additional cost on top of the general value of our food system. You can see here that more than $9 trillion relates to negative health consequences. So I'm thinking about things such as diabetes and maybe some cardiovascular problems due to poor diets or not eating the right foods or too much of the wrong foods, this sort of thing. And then there's also a lot of money, unfortunately, from negative environmental effects. And we really don't have a handle on the true cost of food or this sort of thing, but it's important to keep that in mind. It's important to note as well that there's a price distortion in our food system, and I'm sure I'm not surprising many of you here. If you went out to buy something like a Big Mac, it might cost you $5, but the true value would really be $13 if you didn't have this subsidy going on that certainly is going on in the US today. And a pound of hamburger would actually be about $30. I think that's a reasonable assessment. So we're probably all aware of it, but it's pushed back to the back of our minds on a day-to-day basis. And, transforming our food system is really critical. Looking here, we can see that the cost of food or global subsidies could rise to as much as $1.8 trillion in 2030. So, this is just very harmful in terms of our environment, and price distortion is harmful to everybody, really. You can see that we have some subsidies for products that aren't necessarily the best for us or the best for the planet. So it's just important to keep that in mind. I'm sure this is nothing surprising to you again, but certainly a huge percentage of the world's population is involved in agriculture, and a lot of these are folks who are in low and middle income countries. So again, a transformation of our food system is really, really important if we want to see some differences in equitability throughout the world. And of course, we're running out of arable land. So if you look at this graph here on the left-hand side, most of this data I'm showing you comes from World in Data. It's very easy to find this online, and you can look at this yourself. But you can see here we have, grazing in this sort of brownish red, and then cropland in green, and how much it's gone up over the past, let's say, 50 years. So we're really running out of land that we can even farm or use for cattle or whatever. And of course, our food system, the way we produce our food is very harmful to the environment. Here we're looking on the left-hand side at methane emissions. So you can see agriculture is just so terrible for methane. We have ruminants which would produce methane, our cattle, for example. We have rice production, and we have methane produced that way as well. So there's lots of problems with agriculture and greenhouse gases. Over on the right-hand side, we're looking at nitrous oxide emissions. So this would be the result of using fertilizers and manure and nitrogen running off. We have nitrogen runoff, we have eutrophication in our rivers and streams, things like this. So pollution based on fertilizers and manure. And you can see it's way off the top, much higher than everything else. So the way that we farm right now is creating a lot of pollution in the world. It's creating a lot of greenhouse gases. It's really a bit out of control. it's nice to think about this. I didn't introduce a GMO here or anything that had to do with any sophisticated genetic modification, but we have been genetically engineering our food for eons. So here we're looking at a watermelon, and this is the original watermelon, which was very hard and difficult to eat and very tiny. And this is after much breeding over millennia, we have this many varieties of delicious watermelon around the world. And this is just, again, it's just really traditional crop breeding. On the right-hand side, we're looking at corn, and I think we all know the story of, is it teosinte? Is that how you pronounce it? The original ancestor of corn, and then the many varieties of corn that we have today that are available across the globe. So in that context, we've obviously improved ourselves in our abilities to use biotechnology. And here you can see a bit of a timeline of where we started and where we are today. The ones I want to point out to you are, you can see in the 1960s, sorry, I'm not getting this to come out too well. The 1960s, you can see that we had introduction of fermentation technology. So that's when we started to ferment food in an industrial capacity. Then we had production of recombinant DNA here in the early 1970s. So this is when we started to make things like insulin and use bacteria as our, harness it to produce different drugs and pharmaceuticals. Moving on to the 2013, you can see we actually were able to make our first hamburger in the lab. So being able to cultivate meat and produce a cell culture that ended up being an actual hamburger, albeit very expensive. And then finally, we're down here at 2020. Here's Perfect Day, which is a company that actually can make whey proteins, different types of proteins from dairy, but using microbes. So they will actually use the microbes to produce the food proteins and then constitute an actual food product such as ice cream or milk or what have you. And so there's been a whole timeline of what we refer to as cellular agriculture. So talking for a few minutes about precision fermentation, here we have on the top, we have a cow, and the cow has a rumen. The cow will eat grass or hay or whatever, and then it has this large organ, this large area inside it, which will just digest. It's like a big, huge living fermenter that will digest the food into smaller products, and it will be just full of microbes. An enormous diversity of different types of microbes are available there. So taking this idea, looking at the bottom, we have what we call precision fermentation. And now, instead of using a cow and a rumen, we've got this biofermenter. I'm sorry, it's not coming out too well. This biofermenter here, and we have one type of microbe that we've engineered. And that microbe, this is now full of that microbe, and that microbe is producing one type of protein. So a company like Perfect Day would be producing something like beta-lactoglobulin, or I'm not sure which one they've made, but some type of dairy protein, and they're able to isolate and purify it from these fermenters. So they're not using a cow at all, and they're just looking at one type of microbe instead of a trillion different types, and one type of protein instead of many different types. So here's a chart of different precision fermentation companies. You get a sense of what's going on there. So I've mentioned Perfect Day. There's Motif Food Works. There's Helena, which makes breast milk formula. That's kind of interesting. And there's a whole gamut of others. You can see that they're actual companies with funding and patents and et cetera, starting to sell their products or getting ready to sell their products, getting ready for commercialization. And that's about the state of the world of precision fermentation today. We also have, it's interesting to note, we have a lot of interesting things going on with artificial intelligence. So, today, if you're a microbiologist, it's very easy, costs you very little money to sequence a genome of a particular microbe or any type of organism these days. So we can use that information. And of course, we also have this AlphaFold, which you may have heard of if you're in the molecular biology area. And this will figure out how proteins fold and do this all in a program in such a way that you can identify genes that might produce proteins that fold in a way that resemble food proteins, and then you can substitute different types of plant or other types of proteins in place of animal proteins. And this is in fact what's exactly happened with this company, Eat Just. And what they've done is they've made egg proteins using different plants. And so the particular proteins they've identified fold in the same way and give the same texture, taste, and mouthfeel as the egg protein would. So here we have scrambled eggs made from mung beans, for example, mayonnaise made from peas. So this is another way to change the way we're eating food and taking out the animal, sourcing from something that's non-animal. These alternative proteins can really be very helpful in terms of the environment. So you can see here, we're looking at greenhouse gas reduction. The reduction of emissions is very high for all of these different types of, these are different products you may have heard of, Impossible or Beyond Burger, all sorts of things here. And you can see also land use is greatly reduced because we're using these bioreactors for much of the production, or maybe we're using some plant material. Air pollution also reduced. So there's some perks to all of this. Another thing I'd like to tell you before I end this section is that because food and energy are kind of linked or related, in some way, that there's a really interesting way the market could grow or change across the world. So it's thinking of a country that really doesn't have the outdoor resources for growing food, such as Saudi Arabia or some Middle Eastern country, for example, but they do have energy, don't they? So they do have an ability to produce, to run greenhouses or to run vertical farms, things like this, or another country, let's say Iceland, that also has energy in some form, but they have very short growing seasons. Perhaps they could become a major producer. So we could actually see a change in the way food is produced and where it's coming from, just based on this food energy nexus. So that's just something else to bring up, that we might see pivotal changes in where our food is coming from. All right, so that is a bit of a primer. And now I'm just going to talk a little bit about the landscape for alternative protein, and I've touched on some of this already. So I put it into 4 different sectors. We really call it 3 pillars, and then we talk about molecular farming as the 4th wannabe pillar. We'd like it to be known as that. So first, if you look up at the top left, we have cultivated meat. So this is when we're growing meat in cell culture, or growing meat cells and trying to produce different products like chicken fillet or fish or beef, this sort of thing. I think we can make things like burgers and sausages, and I think people are working hard to make things like steak and really interesting types of foods. And this is all just using cell culture, where maybe a biopsy has been taken from a particular animal, and then the cells have been grown in culture. And there's lots of interesting work going on in this. It's not quite ready for a huge market turnover, but it's on the road, and the prices are going down, so it's becoming more and more feasible. On the bottom left here, we have what we call mixtures of plants, and this is just referring to things like the Impossible Burger, where someone has taken pea or soy or some type of food and a crop and processed it in a manner so that it resembles the hamburger. And it may not taste quite the same, but it tastes pretty darn similar to what you might be expecting if you tried an Impossible Burger and compared it to a regular hamburger. And so that's another thing that's going on. This is when we talk about things like soy milk or pea milk or things like this, So they're just processed in manners that make them really resemble the animal product. On the bottom right, I have mentioned precision fermentation to you. So this is when we use microbes to produce different animal proteins. So again, it's more of a genetic engineering approach, where we know what the sequence is of the protein, and we can actually put that sequence into a microbe, get the microbe to produce that protein at large amounts, just the way we make insulin these days, except instead of insulin, we're making an animal protein. And then in the top here, the top right, we have what I call the fourth pillar, and this is molecular farming. And this is kind of similar, you know, to precision fermentation, and kind of similar also to plant mixtures, in the sense we're using plants in greenhouses or open fields in some cases, but we're just taking one protein and we're producing it in plants. So instead of using microbes and these big fermenters, we're using plants in greenhouses or maybe open fields to produce a particular protein, and then purifying it from there. So in general, I think the future of molecular farming looks very, very promising indeed. There's lots of companies, besides my own startup, there must be, you know, a dozen or 20 even at this stage. I haven't put all of them up here, of different molecular farming companies that are coming along across the globe. And I will mention a few of them for you, because I can't talk too much about the details of my own, but I know about others. And the nice thing about this is most of us come from different university settings. We're all quite friendly with each other. We all know each other. We actually meet and have roundtables and talk about our issues and our challenges, and we try to work together. For example, you know, there's an interest in life cycle assessments. We're all trying to work so that we're on the same page. We produce the same life cycle assessments in the hopes of boosting confidence in the economic community, that we're all doing the same thing and we've got our acts together. Okay, so what will you see soon in the market for molecular farming? And I've just chosen 4 companies here. Moolec is producing myoglobin. Myoglobin is a protein that it's a heme-containing protein. It will carry iron. So for folks who are anemic, this could be really useful. And they are producing this. So this would be found in animal meat. Nobel Foods, I'll mention, they're producing casein. Casein is a major protein found in cheeses and dairy. BioBetter, I'll mention, they also produce what we call growth factors for those who are making cultivated meat, which is very expensive. The growth factors that you need to produce this, we can make them really cheaply in plants, and that's what they're focusing on. And then a final one is Palopo. These two are from Israel, and they are making ovalmin, chicken egg ovalmin, and they do this in potatoes. So just briefly, I'll go through these. So somebody is requesting to view and control. Okay, I'm not going to touch anything. It seems to be moving on its own. All right. So, so this is Moolec technology. You can see here's they're using soybean to produce myoglobin, and this is their first product here. So these are soybean plants. They're growing. This is a transgenic plant. This is a plant that will be producing, actually it's a pig myoglobin. So you can see it's pink because it's a heme protein. It's going to be able to carry iron. And they're producing this in plants. They're growing it out in the field. So this is a transgenic plant out in the field kind of situation. Okay. Try to get this to move to the next. There we go. Okay. So, and this is how they do it. So even this picture, I think, is a little bit, it's actually even more simplistic than this. They're showing you, here regularly what we would do to get our meat and protein. Here's seeds, crops, and then the animals obviously eating the feed, and then we end up eating the animal. And here, they're actually showing you the animal, but it's really just the gene sequence for the myoglobin, which you can find on the computer. It's available on websites. So you take the myoglobin nucleotide sequence, not actually the animal itself, and you would insert that into plants and grow them up, and then you completely avoid the animal at all, and then you're making the food product, and you don't need an animal in this case. And so just looking at this, again, this comes from Moolec, but you can see how the greenhouse gas emissions for some of these animal products, such as beef, it's just so high, all the things that you need to do. go down to soy, and it's so low. So, it's not a bad idea to use a major crop that's all around the world, and it's a very important crop for farmers, and to produce this protein. The Mulek folks think that they can get farmers to buy this and have an added value crop. This could help farmers who are struggling already. This could help a lot of people. They're doing all kinds of tests right now, such as looking at how much iron is taking out of the soil, what is the microbiome, how does it change in the soil. They're asking all these sorts of cool questions. So they're working away at it. And I think within the near future, we'll see this product out there, could be available for farmers, could be available for consumers. They've talked about a few protein products. One they mentioned was that, is it TVP, the vegetable protein? That goes into a lot of things. So they said they could start with that, and other things could come out. And here's Mulek. They actually, went through an initial public offering a few years ago. So there they are at the NASDAQ. So there actually is a molecular farming company that's gone this far. Another one I'll show you is Nobel Foods. So this is right from their website. They're a nice, very nice group of people. And they are making casein in soy as well. So the same idea, they feel they can fit this transgenic crop right into the current ecosystem. They can sell to farmers. Farmers can grow this casein. It's going to be really helpful. There's a huge increase in dairy. Every year the number of folks who want to eat things like cheese is increasing. And this is all coming from plants. It's a transgenic plant, but there's already an infrastructure for transgenic soy. It's not that big a leap for them to work with this particular added protein. Moving on, this is BioBetter. This is an Israeli company. In this case, they're in the greenhouse. They are also working with transgenic plants, but they are making those growth factors, and they can make them really, really cheap. So probably several thousand times less than what you would have to do if you were trying to buy them separately. So they're doing a good job with that. And then finally, here is Palopo. This is the company that grows potatoes, and they've put the chicken egg ovalbumin in the potatoes. They can then grow these potatoes up. They're expressing the chicken ovalbumin. So it's egg white protein. They can take that out. They can dry up the potatoes and easily extract the chicken ovalbumin. So they're a fun company coming out. So I've given you a number of examples. Forte Protein has its own distinct, types of technologies, and I told you I can't really mention much, but I will tell you that a lot of this comes from the origins of all of this comes from molecular farming in general, which started in the pharma space. So it started many years ago, and it really started with producing vaccines in plants. So this is the way this kind of technology got going, and I think we got good enough at it, and then there became such a desire for alternative proteins, and we figured we could put the two together and actually make food proteins this way as well. So you can see here, this is just showing you that, yes, we can make vaccine proteins in plants, consume the plant or purify the protein, and this will elicit a mucosal immune response in humans. And there's been quite an interest over the years. This has, by making our vaccines, for example, in plants, we can bypass the need for things like refrigeration or syringes or trained medical personnel. This is easy enough to scale up, and it's very low in cost. And because you're working in plants instead of an animal culture, there's no concern about biocontamination, things like this. And this makes it very accessible. The idea of making vaccines in plants, it enhances the accessibility to those who need vaccines in developing countries and may not have refrigeration or sophisticated ways to get things around. So that was the big interest in the time. When we've had some outbreaks of, for example, Ebola, plant-made vaccines and pharmaceuticals became kind of noteworthy. Actually, some of the basis of this initiated at Cornell. But we were able to make monoclonal antibodies in tobacco that would dampen or neutralize Ebola virus. And so these were tested out on some Americans who were in Western Africa, came back to the United States and had contracted Ebola. So this was like an experimental medicine for them. And so they were in the news a bit. But you can see here that we can use these plant-made vaccines. We can either purify them from the plant itself into what we think of as regular drugs and provide those as a cheap way to make them available to developing countries, or we can just partially purify, for example, lyophilized tomatoes, expressing a vaccine protein into a powder, and then resuspend the powder when we're ready to provide it to someone. Or my favorite is just enable these countries to develop their own molecular farming technologies to address their own particular diseases, which are often quite different than the diseases we'd see here. So I've been in this field for a while. This is some work I did, and ironically, it happened right before the COVID pandemic. So I was invited by the government of Egypt to go, and this is somebody's backyard, and I'm just showing you a camel culture. So in this day, coronavirus, same as our SARS-CoV-2, we had MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, which is another coronavirus, and folks were very worried about this. And it's carried by camels. It's endemic in much of the camel population, and sometimes it outbreaks to humans and has a very high death rate for humans. And at the time, there certainly was no vaccine available or much of anything. And so I collaborated with a colleague of mine at the University of Toronto, and he was able to make an antiviral protein, and he did this in a fancy phage display way, which I won't go into the details, but basically he made a small protein that would bind to one of the, it's actually the replicase of the Middle Eastern respiratory virus, and block it dead. It couldn't replicate, and so it would stop the virus from being able to move around and kill people. And I've put this map here just to show you what camel culture is across the world. If you think of Western Africa all the way to the very east, there's lots and lots of people who live in this area, like billions, right? And many people there have a camel culture. You'll find camels all over the place. These are ancient camel roots, I think, what we're looking at here. And it's a worry that this particular virus could spring on and cause a major pandemic. And so the idea was that we would produce this in plants, this particular antiviral protein, produce it, and then it could be available in something like an inhaler. So if someone came down with the disease, or their family members or close associates would have a way of protecting themselves with this antiviral, it would be very cheap and easy. And of course, we had the COVID pandemic, and so my colleagues started to make other antivirals that were very similar, that bound to the COVID-19 replicase, and also the original SARS-CoV-1 replicase. So we have all three. We're producing all three in plants. While we did this, of course, it was very difficult to work here since we were shut down. I have this colleague at Arizona State University, Sean Chen, and he had all three, let's see, had Omicron, Delta, and I think the original COVID-19 virus available in his lab for use. He had all, managed through all the regulations to do that. So we started working together, and he tested out these antiviral proteins in cells. We ended up using, so this is a plant-made norovirus, empty virus-like particle. So this is, norovirus is a virus that's for humans. It causes gastro problems, I'll say, but there's no nucleic acid in it. It's empty, and we made it in plants, so it assembles in plants, and it's just the empty virus particle without anything to cause you harm. And the reason we made it, and then we stuck our antiviral protein on the surface of it, is because it easily goes into epithelial cells. So we could add this, we could make these virus particles in plants, we could add our antiviral protein, and then he tested this out in cell culture and in mice. He has really super great results. We're going to be publishing in the next little while, and I won't steal his thunder because he's got lots of good data that one day you'll see out there in publication pretty soon. But this just gives you an idea of the kind of things that plants can do in terms of pharmaceuticals. And then we just really became good enough at working with them that we were able to move on and think about making alternative food proteins as well, because we've come that far. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking about plant viruses as biologics, because that's really my super background. And we also use the viruses of plants for different purposes. And these are the main ones we use. This is tobacco mosaic virus, potato virus X, and cowpea mosaic virus. And this just gives you an idea of the gamut of things that we can do with viruses. And again, they're very easy to work with. They're easy to work with in the lab. I'm able to hand this to somebody in Nigeria or Botswana in a lab there, and they're able to work with it because it's not too fancy. You don't need biohazard level 4 or anything like this to work with it. So we can collaborate, which I really like. And here you can see the main things I'm talking about here are just diagnostics and pharmaceuticals. Because we know so much about plant viruses, we can actually design them on the computer. We know exactly what they look like, how they assemble. We can add our own drugs and conjugate different types of reagents to them. So here's a plant virus. This is potato virus X. We've added an anti-cancer drug to the surface of it. And then we're able to take that out and try it out on folks, or, well, mostly animal models at this stage, and it's able to reduce cancers. Here's one of the first examples we had. These are cowpea mosaic virus, empty virus particles. In this case, we don't even have any kind of drug conjugate, but we found that when we inject these into the tumors of mice, the tumor would regress. So here you see on the top, very little tumor progression, where on the bottom we've injected this mouse with just PBS, phosphobuffer saline, and you can see that it's not getting rid of its tumors. So we think the way this works is that we make the plant viruses, and then we inject them into the tumors, and then the tumors have their own microenvironment. They have what we call quiescent neutrophils, which is part of your immune system. It just goes to sleep in this environment. But these plant viruses are able to awaken them, and they're able to initiate an immune response, and your immune response itself will get rid of the tumor. So this has been shown many times to work. This is just showing you the same thing, where we're injecting into a tumor this plant virus, and then the plant virus sort of wakes up the immune system in this tumor environment and gets rid of the tumor. So imagine having a plant virus vaccine that will get rid of this. So get rid of cancers. So it's really exciting work. Again, most of that has been done in animal models so far, but it just gives you the idea. And again, it's, I think, very applicable for low to middle income countries. So I'm just going to spend 2 minutes talking about my entrepreneurial journey, how I got here and that sort of thing. Certainly with the kind of work I've done and writing I've done, I'm very concerned about how many people there will be on the planet by 2030. And we already don't seem to have enough to feed everybody, and we're certainly not going to if we're going on the current trajectory at that time. At the same time, I noticed that there was this shift in consumer behavior away from animal source protein. So I thought the time is nigh for people to think of other ways of getting their protein that doesn't necessarily come from an animal. So that was attractive to me, to think about moving in this direction instead of staying in the pharma world. And you can see here, first I had companies coming and asking me about technologies that I had in the lab and had published and never had a patent for, and I didn't really know what to do with them. And then I had several pretty prestigious business school students come to me and ask if they could showcase some of the technologies in some of their competitions. And that got me thinking, well, if people want to showcase this in their competition, why am I not starting my own company? This seems kind of silly. And then finally, I think what really got me going was a colleague of mine, and I wrote an opinion piece in the Wall Street Journal. And almost the next day that it came out, somebody emailed me and said, I'm so enamored with this. I'm so interested in what you're doing. I want to give you some money. And here's quite a bit. It wasn't quite a bit from his point of view, but it was quite a bit from my point of view. So that was really exciting. Unfortunately, we almost got things going, and then the pandemic hit and everything shut down. And so we were just sitting around I was feeling very frustrated. But some good things happened during this time. I found another investor. This first investor went away because we couldn't get going because everything was shut down. So I couldn't work in the lab, couldn't do anything. The second investor came along, and he didn't mind. He was interested. And then I moved through the pandemic with, this is the Cornell entrepreneurship group. This is WE Cornell. I think it's women's entrepreneurship. They helped me sort of focus and really see the prospects, the potential. And then I applied for and joined what we call the Clean Tech Open. They're just interested in new technologies that would see us be helpful for the environment. They were more of an environmental, what we call accelerator. So they have folks to help you for free. They're mentors who will move you forward and try to get your technology looking like it really is a company. And then finally, we got accepted into this Indie Bio program, which actually gave us money to get us going and be able to rent out our lab, buy equipment, to hire people and move forward. And then we started to look like a real company. Then by that point, we had so VCs, venture capitalists, start to bring in money, and that really got us rolling. And now we're just rolling along. And that's the end of my talk. Thanks very much for listening.
Thank you, Kathleen. That's fascinating. I don't even know how to formulate a question, so I won't start. But I would like to open the floor to those who are more courageous than I to ask a question about this amazing sounding technology. Kelly.
Great presentation. Thank you so much. I'm interested in the nutrient and micronutrient comparison between the plant-based meat-like products or plant-based products and their equivalent in the conventional way.
Yeah, so a lot of plant scientists try to ask me these questions. So, I think what are you getting to amino acids or differences, or no, nothing like that? Okay. Nutrition. Just the nutrition in general. So certainly we have not encountered a problem producing any of these animal proteins in using plants. We've made, a whole bunch, and they seem to be, have the same functionality, seem identical. So that hasn't been a problem. So for someone like Impossible Burger, that's a